Welcome to the Blue Yonder Overland podcast. I'm your host, Jen, and each week we're excited to bring you practical advice and stories on how you can make adventure more a part of your life, whatever that looks like, but especially to make overlanding more approachable. This week we're excited to bring you our 14th episode featuring an interview with Amanda Zito, who has adventured all over the U.S. on her motorcycle and has lots of advice to offer about finding community and cooking and previews some of her upcoming adventures. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, welcome back to Blue Yonder Overland podcast. I'm your host, Jen, and I'm so excited to have with me today a very special guest, Amanda Zito. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Amanda, I actually just met her recently at the Overland Expo SoCal event, and I had come across some of your content online beforehand, actually, because you are a little bit unique, being in the motorcycling women traveler space. And so I had seen you were going to be at the Overland Expo, but then still when me and my sister-in-law Alex were walking around and we realized we were right in the content creator area, when I saw your sign, I was like, oh, wait, I just followed you on Instagram. Like, you're doing some really cool stuff. And we were so excited to get to meet you. So that was an awesome introduction. But just for our listeners, a little bit of background to fill in some more gaps. Amanda grew up on a ranch in Montana, eventually switched from riding horses to riding motorcycles, and has ridden her motorcycle all over the contiguous 48 states. I have questions about Alaska, but we'll get to that later. And is full-time as a content creator as of 2020, though also trained as an illustrator and tattoo artist. And she's also recently published the Motorcycle Camp Cookbook, which I know all of you have heard me mention before. It's filled with awesome tips and recipes. Anything else you'd like to add just by way of introduction, Amanda?
I mean, like, you covered all my things. You were very well researched. Well done.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I did notice as I was doing some research on your YouTube channel that you just posted a video about motorcycling in Northern Arizona for an Overland Expo West event and also doing Highway 89A around Sedona, which, that was so cool to see because we had a chance to do some camping there at the end of 2023. And like you said, it's just amazing views in every direction. It was stunning.
Yeah, no, it was a gorgeous, gorgeous area. I feel so fortunate that we had the time to go down there and do that. And oh my God, I fell absolutely in love with Jerome. That town is just...
Okay. Fun fact. I was like, I wish I had watched this video before going down there because you had some great ideas for where to go that were slightly less busy. Because like you, yes. I felt a little overwhelmed in the Sedona area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We rode through. I had all of the intention to stop at a few restaurants in Sedona, actually. I had done most of my research about Sedona. And when we rolled through, the amount of people was just a little overwhelming for me. I do have anxiety. I try to be aware of what my triggers are so I can manage the results of those triggers. And when I can, I try to avoid super busy areas because I have a thing about having an exit. And
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we skipped Sedona and just kept going. And I knew some surface level information about Jerome. And that like the historic part of Jerome and its mining history, but I didn't know the super strong artistic community that is there now. And being such a small town, there are so many thriving businesses right there, which is incredible.
That's so cool to see in a small town, one that's kind of come back to life. That's awesome.
Yeah. And there was definitely people in Jerome, but not near the crowds that you experience in Sedona. So it was like the perfect middle ground of like wonderful, wonderful food, and lots of like really like neat little businesses, but not so overwhelming that I didn't feel like I could explore, you know?
Yes, for sure. Well, and then I also saw it looked like you did kind of a combination approach just in terms of where to stay, which was the other thing that kind of surprised me about that whole area. You know, there's a lot of the Coconino National Forest around there. There's a lot of national forest area, but still it was harder to find camping sites than we had predicted for sure. And so I liked your approach of like being okay with a hotel sometimes, but it looked like then you did find a site perhaps in national forest land as well, or I couldn't tell if it was a campground, what combination you had done there.
Yeah, we had initially planned to camp in that Rock Creek Canyon area because I had looked ahead of time and it looked like there was a ton of campground options. So I was like, it's a Monday, like we should be able to find one spot to slip in, and all of them were packed. Which like now makes sense. Like what there's so many campground options because the demand is so high there,
Yeah.
which makes sense. And same with you. I did have a couple of dispersed camping backups in that area, and they were also all full, which was
Yes.
really, really interesting.
Yes.
Like
I
coming
think
from,
that's what surprised me the most was how
yeah,
competitive it was even for dispersed. I was like,
yes.
interesting.
Yeah, like coming from Oregon and Washington, Idaho, and Montana is like where most of my experience dispersed camping is. And most of the time, even a popular area, if you go deep enough, you can normally find a little spot. And that was not the case in Northern Arizona.
Yes. Yes, I resonate with that so much because our experience has mostly been in the Pacific Northwest, and you can just always find some other little pullout or the road, a little turn that you missed earlier.
Yeah,
It's been eye-opening to do it more in the Southwest or even in Colorado, where it's just
yeah.
you have to be pretty careful planning, even for the dispersed.
Yes. Yeah. I was very grateful that most of the time when I plan these kind of trips, I have backups for backups for backups. So even when we came across the fact that like there wasn't a campground, I knew where our next options were. And then like the hotel is always like my last option. And even for hotels, I always mark multiple options for backups because we have come across areas where like even the hotels are fully booked.
Wow.
Especially in Utah. Utah is normally where we've experienced that, even if we call 6 different hotels and they're also all booked.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I try to keep my
Yeah.
options open as much as possible.
Definitely. Well, wow. Okay. We're going to have to circle back to, I think, your approach to planning, because I think we all would have something to learn from that. But I think I'd love to start back at the very beginning with your life growing up on a ranch in Montana. I'm guessing that you've always kind of had a connection to the outdoors, but did you grow up camping as a family, or what was your introduction to kind of camping?
My first experience with camping was actually hunting. My family, or at least my dad specifically, made sure all of us took hunter safety. We all knew how to handle a gun, and so that we could go hunting together. It was purely a subsistence thing. We don't hunt for trophy or anything like that. It was always we hunt because we needed food. For context, like there was 6 of us kids plus my mom and dad, and we were all on one income. And it was a little rough sometimes. But we always were fed. But that's why we went hunting most of the time. And our herd was small enough that we'd be able to butcher 1 or 2 cows a year, but
Okay.
like
Yeah.
supplementing with deer over the winter like was very helpful.
It's awesome that you lived in a place with the abundance of game to be able to do that. It's awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Very fortunate for sure. I'm under no illusions about like the privilege that we had growing up in that area for sure. So my first introduction to camping was going hunting, and mostly it was like car camping.
Sure.
Like RV, like occasionally we would pull a little Shasta trailer into the woods, and that would be the hunting lodge or whatever for 1 or 2 days. And then we would all go camping as a family, but again, RV. My dad traded somebody to trade somebody for a Winnebago motorhome.
Nice.
There was a lot of barter going around in Montana. So.
That's awesome. What a way to do it. That everyone gets something they could use and are happy with. I love that.
Yeah. So we used to go on at least 1 or 2 trips every summer. We would go up to Flathead Lake from the valley, which is only a few hours, and then we would all camp in the motorhome. But most of the time it was 9 to 10 people in a motorhome that is made to sleep maybe 3 or 4 people. So inevitably, like somebody would have to sleep under the motorhome. Most of the time it was my brother. Gary, for those who watch the YouTube channel, was the one who got to sleep under the motorhome. And then I would sleep in the alleyway of the walkway of the motorhome because I was teeny tiny. It was like 9 or 10 when this was happening. And then my sister and one of my brothers would like share the bunk beds in the front of the motorhome. My mom and dad were in the back. My grandmother slept on like the pull-out couch part of the motor.
Wow, like full on, like 3 generations together. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't actually tent camp for the first time until I was like 12 or 13. And that was just like my mom and dad decided that we were all getting too big to all share the motorhome. So they also bought like a big, like 6-person tent.
Nice.
And we just slept in our sleeping bags on the ground. And we were all young enough, it doesn't matter that we didn't have sleeping pads. Like it didn't even occur to us. If we felt uncomfortable, my grandma would pull out like the mattress toppers, and that was our sleeping pads.
That works.
Yeah.
I love how resilient young kids are. It's like, you sleep on some pine needles, you'll be fine. You won't feel that in the morning. Nowadays,
totally okay.
Not so much.
Yeah, I look back at some of the situations that I camped on, like slept on the ground, totally fine. I could not. Anyway.
Oh, man. Well, so then that's quite an introduction to camping. I'm kind of curious, as you grew into adulthood, was that something that you always enjoyed? Or did you ever have like a backlash or sort of like rebellion against like, we've been camping and now I'm going to do something totally different?
I didn't have a backlash to camping. I don't remember, like, I wasn't going out of my way to be like, let's go camping, mom and dad. I want to do that. But for me, it was like a means to get to go somewhere else. And I never really enjoyed hotels. I always felt really uncomfortable. Just like it always felt like I was in somebody else's space. Yeah. And I just never really got comfy. But if we went car camping or something like that, I could essentially create a safe space for myself. And so it always felt more comfortable for me. And so in high school, I tried to like mimic this impression that I had of camping and being able to go places like new with my friends. And so I had at that point like a Chevy Blazer, and I was like, we'll go car camping. It'll be great. And not even thinking about that the rest of my friends did not have this like foundation of, of camping that I had. And so I don't think I even brought a stove. I had a sleeping bag and I brought my car. I was just sleep in the back of my car, and my friends had brought hot dogs and we were just going to cook them over the fire. And I'm one of those people who just like, if somebody else says they can do the thing, then I am just going to step back and let them do it. Right. A couple of my friends said that they could make the campfire. And so I was just like, okay, cool. You're in charge of campfire. That's not my business. I ended up having to make the fire like hours after sunset while they were trying to make this campfire for like literally 3 hours. And I was like, oh, that was like when I was like, right, not everybody has the same foundation. And that like kind of clicked in, like that I needed to share whatever knowledge I had. And like that was like really the beginning of like when I wanted to start like helping other people like be comfortable camping and going in the outdoors the way that I was. And then that kind of evolved to where we are with YouTube now, where I want to be able to share the information with people so they can experience camping the way that I do.
I love that. I'm curious then, the transition to motorcycling and camping. What was your first experience doing that like?
My first experience moto camping, I didn't have any of the gear. So I went the big box route like most people do when they start getting into camping. You don't really know what you're looking for. So it seems really silly to spend a bunch of money on a tent, like when you could get a tent for like $40 or something at a big box store. And so I had a big box store tent. I had one of those big car camping Intex air mattresses that have zero insulation. Like I had a synthetic sleeping bag that really was not rated very low. It was like a 40, 50 degree bag. And it was my second big trip on the motorcycle. I had done one overnight to Yakima and back from Portland, which was like, I don't know, 600 miles or so. Yeah. Just to make sure that my bike wasn't going to explode, you know. At that point, I had a 1980 Suzuki GS850. She had not been treated very well by her previous owner. So I was always very tentative, like, oh God, when is she going to break kind of feeling all the time. And so after that little overnight tester and everything went okay, I then did my first 1,000-mile trip. Well, more than 1,000 miles. I think that would end up being 1,200 miles, where I went from Portland to Montana and back. But at that point, I didn't
Okay.
have the stamina to be able to do 600 miles in one day.
Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can do it now, but it's definitely a thing that you build up to. You don't start there.
100%. Well, and I think that's actually really critical for people to know who are like maybe entertaining the idea of getting into motorcycling, doing long moto adventures. Yeah, it's humbling how you have to plan on so much less mileage than if you were in a car at the beginning. You can't just look at a map and like treat it as the same as you would trying to break up a trip via car. It's very different.
100%.
Much more physically demanding.
Yes. Well, and you're fully exposed to the elements and you're not in a car. And I think that people underestimate the amount of fatigue that you experience, not only from the wind hitting your body while you're going down a highway, but also the like noise fatigue from like, no matter what kind of helmet you have, like it's going to be loud.
Yes.
Earplugs and everything, it's still louder than being in a car. And so just noise fatigue on like your mental.
That's so true.
It's a real thing.
So true. Yes. Well, and I'm just thinking just your attention span and your body, your posture, everything, you're on edge essentially, the whole time, ready to react, ready to be right there in the moment with your bike and whatever you need to make happen. It's not relaxing and like shuffling radio stations in your car. You can't afford to take your mind off literally what you're doing. And so that is just taxing as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I highly recommend people not do it. I thought, I was like, oh, I'll just split it in half. I'll do 300 miles one day and 300 miles the next, and it'll be fine. And I did it, but I was pooped. I was so tired. If I could go back in time, I would have made it like 150-mile chunks and just done it for a longer period of time. Like I would have been so much happier. Yeah.
It would have been a much more fun trip. But but you built some stamina and endurance.
Yes,
so.
Definitely. So my first campground, I wasn't comfortable dispersed camping with the motorcycle yet. I knew what dispersed camping was from growing up hunting and those kinds of things, but I wasn't comfortable dispersed camping with a tent yet. And especially that was like my first, I mean, I had done a bunch of solo trips with the car and I like car camped by myself before this, but this was my first solo trip on the motorcycle and feeling very exposed. Like you don't have a thing that you can go and lock the doors and lock yourself in.
Yep.
And so I wanted to stay at a campground, and I did an absurd amount of research about this campground before I decided to go. Like I called the owners and asked them a bunch of questions. And it was, I believe it's called Pierce Valley RV Park. It's on Highway 12. And I got there, and the little gal that like had been on the phone, I had asked her all the questions about the campground and if it was gonna be okay that I was gonna be there on a motorcycle. And she's like, yes, honey, it'll be fine. And so I got there like 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, and there's a little gate, and she had to let me in. And she's like, girl, are you by yourself? And I was like, yes. And she's like, I'm going to give you some pie, but you better not be back here by yourself. Like you should be traveling with somebody else. She was the sweetest, but she was so concerned about me. And so she escorted me to my campsite and then like introduced me to both sides of my neighbors so that they both knew who I was and that if I needed help, they would help me. It was the cutest.
Oh, wow.
I could not have asked for a better like first experience being alone camping on the bike. I definitely froze my butt off that night because the Intex air mattress had no insulation. So all the cold air from the ground seeps into the air and the air mattress, and then that seeps the heat out of you. It was a whole thing. But overall, like still 10 out of 10 experience. Would have spent more money on gear had I been more educated. But hindsight is 2020.
Oh, I'd love to then zoom out a little bit now that you've learned so much about planning and what makes a more enjoyable motorcycle trip. What are some of the tenets you kind of keep in mind as you plan a new route? And maybe, I'm not sure what route you're considering next for a motorcycle adventure, but maybe in light of that.
If I'm going to a totally new area that I haven't been before, first I start by looking up all of the public land in that area. I use an app called Onyx Off-Road. That's my preferred. Gaia is also a great option that has layers that you can turn on public lands and those kinds of things. But I try to plan my trip around three main points. Like one, I'm probably going to that area for a very specific reason. Like there's something that I want to see there. There's something I've heard of, like, or there's a really good restaurant that I really want to try.
Amazing. Nice.
So I'm probably going to the area for a very specific reason, but I also want to plan my route that coincides where the most amount of public lands are. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. Texas was really hard to plan for.
Yes.
But like what I found out in Texas is that they have, like, while they don't have a ton of public land, like Forest Service and BLM and those kinds of things, they have a wonderful state park system.
Yes, I was shocked by that. I was down there recently, and I was like, "What? Why is there no camping?" And then like, "Oh, tons, a wealth of state parks."
Yes, a wealth of state parks, and some of them are amazing, lovely state parks. Waco Tanks was a surprise to me. It was amazing. And yeah, I had a wonderful, wonderful time at the state parks once I figured that out.
Yeah. It's funny. Each state is a little different in terms of figuring out kind of the best camping or public land options.
Yes. Yeah. So starting top down, trying to figure out where the public land areas are, trying to plan around that, because I know, for my comfort level, I love Forest Service campgrounds. If I don't have to, I don't want to dig a hole to poop in, you know?
Yep.
I have been camping long enough now. I don't feel the need to prove anything to anybody. If I can find a campground, I must stay there so that I have access to a pit toilet, something.
Love that. Yep.
So Forest Service campgrounds are my preferred. BLM campgrounds are also great. I love those. And I think BLM campgrounds are like super underutilized, because most people, when they hear BLM, they think dispersed camping first.
Yes.
But BLM also has a wonderful network of designated campgrounds, and are very underutilized.
It's a
comparatively
fun tip. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And so those are the top ones. And then I will mark all of my backup campgrounds. So I'll be like, I really want to stay at this one, but I know from multiple trips across the country now that your first option, even if it says it's open online, may be closed. Even if you can talk to a ranger station, they can't predict what's going to happen in a few months' time. And most of the time, I try to plan my trips a few months ahead of time.
Okay.
Up to a year, depending on how long the trip is. My big, I'm going to be gone for a month, I plan a year ahead of time, just so that I have time, to absorb as much information about the route as possible, so that when all of those what ifs happen along the way, I can pivot and not have an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like most trips are better served if you're more educated on the places that you're going, and always leaving room to learn more, obviously. But if you know more about that area, I feel like it turns into a better trip. And there's definitely an argument for being able to be spontaneous. And my argument is that if you planned well enough, there's always room to be spontaneous.
I love that. Yes, because I think a lot of people, especially on motorcycles, then you're so susceptible to the weather, or if there's construction on a road, or, just any road conditions, that being able to change your route is really nice if you don't have to go through 40-degree rain.
Yes.
I saw one of your recent videos showed that. It's like, yep, that is something I would love to avoid on future trips. And so, I think that's a really interesting thing that you point out, that, the more research, the more prep you've done, it still does allow you to be spontaneous, just in a way where you maybe have some guardrails around the types of choices that you have to make.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. If I went into an area, because I think that when people think about overplanning, they think about a very strict itinerary.
Yes.
I am going to stop here at this time and this time. And that's not the way that I plan. I have an idea of the area that I'm trying to get to every day, but it's a fairly large area. If I hit within 100 miles of that area, I'm on plan, right? And that gives me enough room that, again, if a major storm happens, if a forest fire happens and I have to reroute, all of those things, like if those unexpected things happen, which are inevitable, then I have room and like the overall plan and the research that I have done allows me to know that, oh, this other road is going to take me around this closure so I can get back to the next area that I want to be at. And part of that happens because I spend so much time looking at the map beforehand.
Yes.
And it means that I don't have to sit on the side of the road for 3 hours trying to figure out what my go around is, like, because I already know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now I'm curious, did that grow out of experiences where you did have to sit on the side of the road for 3 hours? Or is that just sort of naturally kind of how you would have tended to approach things anyway?
I have been a planner since like my anxiety has become more of an issue. And I would say that that started around 2010 when I started college. I started
Mhm.
having anxiety attacks really bad. And it did take me a really long time to figure out why, like what my triggers were
Mhm.
and like how to manage the side effects of having this kind of anxiety. And part of the ways that I figured out how to manage this anxiety was like, part of mine is like the what if. I think most people with anxiety has the what if voice in the back of their head.
Yeah.
And the more planning I could do for the what ifs, the quieter that voice got and the more I could enjoy my trip.
Mm.
Um, and so it means that I have a lot of information that I don't end up having to use, but it, for me, makes the whole experience much more enjoyable. And a lot of the times, if like I encounter somebody else or if I went on a trip to an event and like there are people who didn't plan as much as I did, which is most people, I can be like, oh, but didn't you know that this is up the road or something like that? Oh, no, I didn't know that. And like elements like that, like they would have missed that
Yeah.
like entirely. And I have also done that before. Like the first time that I went to Bears Route when I was still in Joshua Tree, I didn't know that the national park was so close. Like could have popped right into the national park. Had no idea. So definitely like the way that I have planned has definitely evolved because when I first went out, most of my what if questions was about breakdowns.
Mm.
And less about like hazards on the road and that kind of stuff. So when I first started planning trips and doing longer trips by myself, most of my research was about where every single dealership was along my route, where I could find parts, where the tow trucks were, where the hospitals were. I knew all of that all the time.
Wow.
And which also served me really well when I broke down in the middle of nowhere in Montana. I knew exactly which tow truck company to call because I knew which one was closest.
That's amazing. How do you store all this information then for your trips on your bike? Is it on some sort of digital device or do you have like paper copies of some of the levels of information?
Now it's all digital. I use 3 different apps, which is excessive. You could put this all in a notes app, which is totally okay. I use Onyx Off-Road, and Onyx lets you like have little folders where you can organize waypoints and routes and stuff. And so I have a folder for every trip. And then in that folder, I have waypoints that mark an excessive amount of information.
Love it.
All of the campgrounds that are in that area, all of the dispersed camping areas that are in an area along my route within 50 to 100 miles of my major route. And then I mark all the hospitals, I mark the major dealerships, and I look at reviews and I do all of the things. I mark major points for tow trucks, especially in areas that are super rural.
Yeah.
And then I think I said I mark hospitals, and then I mark like a bunch of restaurants, so that I know where the good food is. In Wyoming, I have almost like every grocery store in Wyoming marked on a map someplace.
That's awesome.
Because like Wyoming and Texas are some of the biggest food deserts in the U.S.
Yes.
They're hundreds of miles without a grocery store. So I mark all the grocery stores so that I know when I need to pick up food and when the big gaps are that I'm not going to be able to pick up fresh food. So all of those waypoints and all that information is in Onyx. And then I download those maps offline for the next, I try to have the offline maps for the next 2 or 3 days of my route, unless I know I'm going into an area I'm not going to have service. So like if I did a BDR, for example, I would have the whole thing downloaded offline on my phone. my backup navigation is normally a larger paper map route of the area. And because I do so much research beforehand, even though the paper map isn't as detailed as Onyx, I normally know if I'm going to the backcountry where my exit roads are.
Yeah.
And so then I can get down to a highway and get out if I need to, even if I lose my phone.
Okay.
And then I use 2 other apps. One is called Trello, and then one is called Milanote. Milanote is like my big brain. That's where I pull information like articles or tourism websites and like that kind of information all into one area. And then Trello is my day-to-day plan.
Okay. Love that.
So yeah, especially because of the YouTube thing, I have to use Trello so that I know like what clips I need to get to make a video consistent and like cover everything. Because if I don't have that, then I'll like forget to film for half a day, and then there's like this big gap in the video.
Oh, that would be so hard. I'm just, truly understand the level of organization it must take you to produce your videos, along with the trips. I mean, because the trip logistics and of themselves are a whole plan too. Wow. Yeah. A couple of things or questions I want to circle back to. One, you mentioned BDR, backcountry discovery routes for listeners. Which ones have you done?
I've done most of Idaho at this point in sections.
Okay.
The only parts that I'm missing is like from Pierce to the Canadian border. And so my brother and I are planning to do that this summer. So I'm really excited. We're going to do the whole thing in one go, so that I can make a whole video series about it. I'm really excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've done sections of Oregon. Before Oregon became an official route, I had done a bunch of the sections that ended up in the route. So I've done parts of Oregon. I've done parts of Washington. I think section 1 and part of section 2. When I used to work at a Harley and Triumph dealership, and we used to take people on day rides on their new Tigers so they could figure out how to ride off road with them.
Ooh, fun.
I did section 1 of the California South BDR, and I burnt the clutch on that Tiger. There's like a gnarly, like most people will be familiar with it who are familiar with BDR. It's called Indian Pass in section 1, and it's like this deep pea gravel. And I am not the only one who has burnt my clutch in that section.
Oof, that does not sound fun.
We tried to start section 2 before. I was like, yeah, no, my clutch is not going any farther. We're not going anywhere.
Wow.
So my friends went and did section 3 and 4. And then I went to Phoenix and spent 5 days in Phoenix getting my clutch fixed. I think I've inadvertently done sections of Utah, but just short little bits. And then I did section 2 of the Wyoming BDR, and I did that with a migraine, and I really don't recommend it. I smashed the ground really hard.
Oh no.
But yeah, I think that's all of them.
Wow. You mentioned earlier that another thing I wanted to circle back to too, you mentioned going to a Babes Ride Out event near Joshua Tree. And then I think I've also seen on some of your content going to like the ADV Fest that was in the Black Hills, which I also putting a pin in that because my parents have just retired to the Black Hills on a ranch that my mom grew up on. So curious where you have found like good examples of finding community within the motorcycle adventuring world, if it was at places like that or if there's others.
I think like no offense to Babes Ride Out. Babes Ride Out was great. Babes Ride Out is definitely more catered to cruisers. Like sometimes it can be harder to have like conversations about like what you like to do when you go riding in different niches of the community. I'm not saying that they're
that's
not.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Like not
for somebody
not that they're
who's
not
newer,
friendly.
Yeah. But for someone who's newer to it, I'm thinking, cool, we all like motorcycles, but then it's like, okay, they are niches.
Yes, there's definitely niches. Babes Ride Out is a great niche for like cruisers. If you're going to stay on pavement and do trips like that, that's like a fantastic place to start. I think it's great. And I think there's an element, especially as a woman, going to female-led events like that, it feels a little bit easier to start conversations.
Yeah.
But my favorite, I think, is Tour Tech Rally in Washington. That is one of the most open ADV communities that events that I have been to, like everybody wants to talk. Everybody wants to go ride. Like everybody's looking for a group to ride. It's really easy if you go by yourself to find somebody else to ride with.
Mm.
And ADV Fest has also fostered that for sure.
Okay.
Like if you show up to ADV Fest by yourself, it's very easy to find somebody else to ride with. And they've designed it that way. So it's super, super easy to find new friends at ADV Fest. We have made a ton of new friends between Gary and I just going to ADV Fest for like the last 4 years.
That's awesome. Are you going to go again this year?
This is the first year we won't be there because we're going to go do the Idaho BDR. But I love that event so much. It has a special place in my heart. I love it.
Well, hopefully I will have a chance to see you then at a future one, because I'm sure at some point in the future I will be at one of them, since it's in my parents' backyard practically.
Yes. Yeah. I think that people think about it because it's at the
Black
locations.
Hills, the Sturgis Rally. All the history itself, there.
They utilize all of the foundational stuff that already exists at the Buffalo Chip campground, which is great because it means you have access to running water, you have showers, there's a shop there, you can get tires changed. All of that stuff already exists there, which wouldn't happen if they had it like in the middle of a field somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
It does mean that all the off-road riding is an hour away from camp, but it is so worth it because every year, like we've been there again 4 years in a row, we have never ridden one trail, like the same trail twice. Like,
wow,
there is so much riding in the Black Hills. Like,
okay, this is really inspiring me to go off-road because I've only done motorcycles on pavement, and I'm like, okay, now this is really selling me on it.
Yeah. I know people who also live in the area, and they also have like said that they're still finding new stuff, even if they've lived there for over 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a huge,
network.
It's awesome.
Okay. Well, that's a good selling point for it. I'm also, just to kind of round out the conversation on community, curious about the Rocky Mountain Roll, which I saw on your website. Tell me how that came to be. It looks like you started it about 10 years ago.
I did. This is the 10th year that we're doing it. It's a big year. So 10 years ago, I did a thing that I called the pilgrimage, where I lived off of that 1980 Suzuki GSA 50 for about a month and a half. I did a big loop of Montana. I planned Rocky Mountain Roll like just as like a one-off party to just celebrate that I survived and I got back and everything was okay. And a bunch of my friends said that they wanted to go, but they couldn't come the first year because it was too short notice, because I had planned it out like 3 months or so in advance that I wanted to have this party. And my mom was like, if you're having strangers on the property, you have to be able to pay for insurance for all of these hooligans that may break stuff. And I was like, oh, that's fair. And I didn't know that you could make, like, I was just trying to find a ticketing thing so that I could collect money from my friends so that we could pay for the insurance. And I found Eventbrite, and I didn't know that you could make a private event, like just to send links to people. And so I made a public event on Eventbrite for Rocky Mountain Roll. And like a bunch of my friends bought tickets because I was like, if I can pay for insurance this year, then I'll do it again next year, so then everybody can come. And I think the first year there was 18 people showed up, and I knew 3 of them.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And so like here I am like trying to celebrate like this like trip that I just finished on my bike, and like most of the people who showed up didn't even know that I was on a trip. You know, like so that was super fun. Like I made a couple new friends. That was great. And then the second year there was 75 people, which was like most of my friends that I had invited.
Yeah.
And so like that was a fantastic party. And it wasn't like we had like a big infrastructure or anything like that. We had bought porta potties so that people would have a place to go to the bathroom, because we're just talking about a field on the ranch. Like there was no fancy anything going on. And there was no music. We didn't have vendors. There was nothing. And it was just a blast. It was amazing. I loved it so much. And so my mom was like, oh, we'll just do it again. And this was like my mom, who I had to convince let me do it the first time. But like my mom and my dad just like loved the energy. Everybody was so good. Everybody like really respected the property and our home. And it was like the best kind of energy.
Wow.
And so we decided that like 100 people was the max, because that was the best like vibe. Like everybody was still a person, an individual, and you could still talk to everybody. You never got that mob mentality of like being anonymous. And it also just meant that it was way easier to make community because nobody felt overwhelmed about the amount of people that was there. And so we did it again. The third year, 9 people showed up. And I was like, okay, well, this is over. Like this has had its moment. Nobody wants to come anymore. It's fine. And my mom was like, well, you don't know. Like it could just be a fluke. Everybody else was doing stuff. It's like you can't stop now.
That's hilarious that your mom went to like be the biggest champion of this.
Yes. So after you did it again, year 4, there was like about 50 people. And for a few years that was about our average was 45, 50 people, which was fantastic. And the vibes were always good. We've evolved. Now there's a redneck shower, which is essentially like a big agriculture like water tote with like a garden head off of it. So
amazing.
It's cold, but it's a shower.
Gets the job done.
And we have a big tote of drinking water now, so everybody can have drinking water. The more bathrooms now, or porta potties more than anything. And we give everybody pizza Saturday night. We support a local pizza business in Hamilton. We buy like 200 something slices of pizza and bring it back so that everybody can have pizza Saturday night during the raffle. A couple of businesses in town brings us like stuff for the raffle. So most of the time everybody gets something, depending on how many people are there.
Yeah.
And then we take everybody Saturday morning to farmers market. And so it's super fun to get to be like the motorcycle gang that shows up to farmers market and everybody's like, what is this? What is going on right now? But that's like super fun because like the community loves it. Like they're so excited to see all these motorcyclists. They're like, what is happening right now? But it's a super great time. And almost every year now, Sunday, we take everybody to Missoula to Montgomery Distillery, which is a locally made whiskey distillery. They also make vodka and other things, but they have like a motorcycle show in the distillery. So Sunday, we take everybody to the motorcycle show. And it's become like this lovely, like tight-knit community. We have lifers that have been there every year for 5 years, 6 years. And we also just like get people who are just like, what is this? Or like people who have never been to a motorcycle event at all. And they get really overwhelmed by the thought of going to a big motorcycle event where there's a ton of people. Yeah. And they know that like my event's going to be capped. So they feel more comfortable like that being their first experience. One of our volunteers, Sandy, that's how she found us because she felt a little bit too overwhelmed to go to Babes Right Out by herself the first year because of course Babes Right Out has like 1,000 women most of the time. And so that's how she came to us. And now she's a lifer. She's been one of my volunteers for like the last 3 or 4 years. She's amazing.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and hearing you talk about volunteers, and I'm guessing you've had to, think a little bit more formally or strategically about it rather than just being like, oh, it's a bunch of friends showing up. It's kind of evolved into something beyond what you initially thought. Yes. Curious what else you've kind of had to think about or ways that you've actually specifically tried to foster that sense of community? Or is it still just very organic in terms of you have some volunteers, but everyone just kind of takes care of the community aspect themselves? Or have you had to do specific things to help sort of ensure that spirit stays there?
I mean, there's definitely ground rules. It's not like like no holds barred kind of like hope you govern yourself kind of situation. There's definitely rules, and like part of how like we keep everybody feeling like it's a close knit thing is that my mom is the one that checks everybody in at the gate.
Love that. Yeah. It instantly makes you feel like you're part of a family, which also then comes with, expectations about how you behave to each other. And love that.
Yes. And like when you're talking to somebody like that is their home, it brings it way more like down to earth. Like you're not like there to party. You're there to like hang out, and be respectful that this is our home, all of those things. And everybody has been amazing. Like the 10 years that we've been doing this, I've only ever had to ban like 2 people. And I think that's amazing.
That's a pretty great track record.
Yeah.
Especially for the motorcycle community, which, has its own reputation about
Yes. So it all starts at the gate when we check you in. And like you get a little lesson about how to open and close the gate because that's like a whole thing. And like my mom lays down the ground rules and why they exist, and everybody's like super chill about that. And then one of my volunteers leads you out to the campground, and that part has evolved so that we can maintain a fire lane so that like if something happens, not that anything has happened, but if something happens, we can
Best
an
to be
ambulance.
prepared.
Yes, an ambulance can get into the camping area and get out like with cleared. So that's part of the reason there's now a volunteer that goes and shows people where to camp. There, like that is also a thing that's evolved. There's like lines, like not painted, but there's little flags to mark out where you can camp instead of it being a free for all. And that had definitely evolved like after like we were very regularly getting 50 odd people, and we just wanted to make sure that that like stayed fairly organized.
Yeah.
One for emergency access, but also so that people didn't feel like other people were like clustering in on their space.
Yeah.
And so that has also evolved in other ways. And then the other reason I need volunteers now is that like our covered area has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So it used like the first year we didn't even have like a pop-up or any kind of shade. It was just a couple of hay bales around like a fire pit in the field. And now we have like a big massive canopy, like two big massive canopies that have like offer shade but also protection if it rains.
Right.
And I wouldn't be able to do that without the volunteers.
Oh,
And
that's so cool. You're giving
yeah.
me just all sorts of visions. I'm like, these are some interesting ideas to perhaps like also do something similar on my mom and dad's ranch someday.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
we
just,
need more grassroots motorcycle campouts. Yes.
yeah, it really sounds appealing. I love, just the also capping it and keeping it small. It's so approachable then, like you say, for newer people or people that haven't been to one of the bigger events.
Yes.
Conscious of our time kind of winding down. So want to be sure that I also give you a chance to talk about any upcoming projects that you might have in the works since you've, posted about being done with your lower 48 states. Like what's next on the horizon for you? And you've just published the motorcycle camp cookbook. Is there any, more that you're going to be doing with that?
Yeah. The next big project is, of course, Alaska, because then I will have been to every state. I haven't ridden a motorcycle in Hawaii, but that's I'll get there. I've been to Hawaii, so that like state is scratched off, but Alaska is the last one. So I'm really excited about that. Gary and I are going in August, and fingers crossed that we have a warm fall because we're going to be coming back down in September. So
yes, exciting.
But like that was the only window that we both could make work for as long as we're going to be gone for 40 days. And that's also the longest that my brother and I will have been on a trip together. So hopefully we come back still liking each other. We'll see.
Yikes.
So Alaska is like the next big one. And then as far as books go, I don't think I've shared this anywhere. So secrets.
Exciting.
I was super stoked about the response to the Motorcycle Camp Cookbook, which was amazing and way more than I could have ever imagined. And I was really exciting to get to share like with people that you could cook fresh food off of the bike, and it didn't just have to be dehydrated stuff.
Yeah.
But part of the Alaska trip is us trying to cut down our expenses as much as possible, and groceries in Alaska are outrageous.
Ooh, I can't even imagine.
Very expensive. So in order to try to cut down as many points of cost as we can, I have been dehydrating as much as our food as possible and making little dehydrated meals myself. That we'll then like ship ourselves a care package to my friend in Toke, and that will be our resupply box for the second half of the trip. So I'm sending 2 resupply boxes to myself and Toke, and so that most of our food will still be made by me, but like I'm putting more of that cost up front before we're actually on the trip. So in the next book in the works, and this is like 3 years out minimum, like, by the way, so this is like way in the future. The dehydrated motorcycle camp cookbook is coming.
Perfect.
So
That's
I'm really
amazing.
excited.
I love that. That seems like, yeah, a natural evolution of cooking. That's so cool though that you're still going to be able to do like all of your own food
Yeah.
even before you go. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I've learned so much just in this process alone of like, because I've done a couple of experiments of making my own dehydrated food for trips and that kind of stuff. But when you're doing it at this kind of scale, you learn stuff a little bit faster.
Yes.
And like learning like how much cheaper it is to make your own instant oatmeal versus the packets is crazy. Like things like that,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have occurred to me.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, we've been doing that this year, just getting like a big thing of oatmeal and kind of making our own little like pre-seasoned packets. Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
very excited though to see what recipes you come up with because my husband and I were already so impressed, like looking through just the advice that you had in the Motorcycle Camp Cookbook and, thinking through what things to pack to be as flexible as possible with whatever fresh ingredients you do encounter. And so just loved your whole approach to it. And so it'll be really cool to see what you come up with for the dehydrated recipes. I'm excited.
Thank you.
Well, and with that, I think that's probably a good place to leave our conversation with lots of excitement and anticipation for future adventures. So thank you so much, Amanda, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Me too. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks so much for listening. And if you're still wondering what in the world we're talking about with overlanding or dispersed camping, I'd recommend going back to our first couple episodes where we talk about what exactly overlanding and dispersed camping is and why we love it so much. All of the links we mentioned and any resources we can point you to for this episode are also available online at blueyonder-adventure.com. And if you have any follow-up questions or ideas for topics that we should dive into on future episodes, feel free to reach out at blueyondergen on Instagram or Threads. If you could like or subscribe if you enjoyed this podcast, I'd also really appreciate that. Thanks for listening and thanks for being here, and hopefully we'll see you out in the wild blue yonder.